these are framed properly. Then calibration of instrument, this is very possible. So many companies are there, standard companies are there, which come to your department and they calibrate the instrument. Standard instrument test, again, so many agencies are there, NABL accreditation, etc. So these can be done. This is possible. Interpretation of observation, this is most important step, needs depth, in-depth knowledge of the subject, and then experience always will count for, as at the time of interpretation of the observation. Fifth, with the authorization from the government. Yes, this is very much needed from the government authorization, and then because in the authorization letter there will be a mention of eligible persons who can conduct the test. What is the eligibility of the persons who can conduct the test? What should be the their degree? What should be their knowledge? Then standard procedures to be adapted. So again, what are the different procedures which are adapted for doing performing that particular test? So all these will be thing in authorization letter from the government, and hence this authorization letter will be always needed before submitting a result to the court. So test which can be performed in medical college after observation, after proper authorization. These are the routine tests. I mean, we are not, I'm not discussing regarding very rare tests, but they are which are routinely required tests which can be done in our different departments of our medical college, like CSF examination for alcohol, anesthetic drug, then opium, synovial fluid, time since death. This is again a very important topic for calculating time since death, synovial fluid examination for different chemicals, then vitreous humor examination for alcohol, chloroform, cocaine, pleural fluid, peritoneal fluid, pericardial fluid, amniotic fluid examination for different biochemical changes, particularly in cases of natural deaths. Then bile for narcotics and cocaine, because most these are always concentrated in bile. Then blood samples for RH incompatibility and mismatch transfusion. If there is a death because of mismatched blood transfusion, then for analyzing thing, these samples, blood samples can be subjected to the Department of Pathology, Hematology, and then this can be done properly in our college itself. Then death in anaphylaxis because of anaphylactic reaction, serum tryptase, leukotriene, histamine, bradykinin, trypsin, all these can be performed in our laboratories. Then in drowning, sometimes we require jet lag test to be done. Then sudden death cases where if cause of death is not known, so we have to submit blood for whether patient has died of uremia or diabetic conditions, complications of diabetes, then potassium deficiency, etc. So here you can do your testing in our labs itself. For time since death and age of the injuries, you may need a help of enzyme histochemistry. Enzyme histochemistry. Then, as far as microbiology is concerned, these different tests are there. Then blood, yes, patient has died of malaria. So imprint cytology from a cut surface of the spleen will help in detecting malarial parasites in the blood. Then blood for dengue. Then COVID-19 test, rat test, virology samples, histopathology. Yes, histopathology. Yeah, recently that GR is there, where there is a mention of submission of histopathology for samples of histopathology in medical college itself. Urine for pregnancy test. This can be done routinely. So some important consideration as far as chain of custody is concerned. What are the aims of maintaining chain of custody? Is proper individualization of the sample. Whether sample belongs to a particular person or not, then there should not be any chance of exchange of samples. Then there is easy identification of a culprit if attempt is made to tamper the sample. So for this purpose, you have to make a proper chain of custody. And recently, one GR was there regarding histopathology. Dr. Bijwe, HOD pathology from JJ, he was instrumental in doing this. But then, because of some reasons, all these things are not made properly. Only there was a distribution of work. This GR was issued. But then there has to be, we have to have a SOPs. Dr. Dere was also there in this particular team. Dere, myself, Dr. Ramteke from Chandrapur, and some law person, Dr. Bijwe himself. So they were there. We had a certain 4-5 meetings, but then because of some reason we could not do this job completely. So some important thing as far as histopathology, say for example, histopathology now is authorized. We are authorized to do histopathological examination in medical colleges. Instructions for doctor performing autopsy. For this is for maintaining a chain of custody. What should be the instruction given to the doctors who are performing autopsy? Number one is preservative, which should be added. Prescribed requisition form is there for in duplicate, mentioning all the required details. Then total number of bottles. How many bottles are there? How many total number of tissue bits is preserved in those bottles? Then label, proper label. Preserve the tissue in presence of concerned police. So concerned police should be there in front of us, and in front of him you have to show that these are the number of bottles, these are the number of tissue bits which are kept in the bottle, and proper label of that particular person from whom the sample was collected, and proper seal. Sometimes neutral witness also should be there. He should his age and then his signature should be taken on the label. Then you have to take a receipt of this, giving this particular sample to a concerned police. So you have to take a receipt from that concerned police in a prescribed form. As far as instruction to the police are concerned, he has to check the label over the bottle, seal, total number of bottle, total number of tissue bits there, sign on a prescribed format of receipt of the said sample, handle all the sample carefully so that no damage should be there. These samples to be submitted with prescribed requisition form and forward a letter from the concerned investigating officer. As far as instruction for doctors for pathology department is concerned, he has to check the label over the bottle, seal, total number of bottle, total number of tissue bits, verify them with the prescribed requisition form signed by the doctor who performed the autopsy, check the forwarding letter signed by the investigating authority in presence of the police who has brought the sample, sign on a prescribed format for receipt of the said sample, then maintain an internal chain of custody. After the collection of the sample, those samples should be processed for different steps in doing histopathology. So you have to maintain the chain of custody properly by maintaining a register or by through proper software which is there for this purpose. Then you have to preserve the tissues, blocks, slides as per standard procedures. Take photographs of the observations, and then proper preservation of photographs for future reference. If there is some problems with this, you have to preserve these photographs for future reference. So in short, to summarize my presentation, as far as the facilities of hospital facilities or diagnostic facilities are concerned, which are present in the hospital, we can very well utilize these for medical legal purpose. This can be accepted by the court under certain conditions. These conditions I already discussed, that there should be an authorization letter from the government. There should be a proper chain of custody to be maintained. Then standard operating procedure should be followed for every investigation. So I think we have I have discussed this before all the respected delegates. So anything which we can discuss? Thank you very much.
Sir, thank you very much for your presentation. Hello. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation, sir.
Thank you very much, sir.
The sir has given very lucid overview of utilization of these services, and the most important, whether it is accepted in the court of law. So there are certain conditions he has elaborated for acceptance in the court of the law. There are certain questions which has been raised by delegates.
Yes, sir.
I will ask few.
Yeah.
So first question is by Dr. Sudhir Ninave, sir.
Yes, sir.
Are our facilities ready to do such tests in our colleges without incentive?
I think this is a question before all the delegates. Now these are, as far as government is concerned, when government is doing this particular work, or they are asking us to do this job also. So as far as incentive is concerned, From the government side, I don't think they will give incentives because this is one part of doing work, their profession. So I don't think they will.
Actually, sir, good evening, sir.
Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, sir. Dr. Ninave.
Yes, sir. Good.
Sir, already our forensic persons in government medical setups, they are overburdened by the postmortem work.
No, as far as this session is concerned, sir,
I have asked these questions.
I'm not saying that these tests are to be
Yes,
done
sir.
by Department of Forensic Medicine.
Okay, I will ask you
That's
another
the
question,
pathology
sir,
department.
which is raised
Yeah.
by Dr. Pawan, sir. Dr. Pawan Wankhede from Shahadol.
Yes, sir.
Which permissions will be required for forensic medicine department to give legally acceptable reports of blood grouping?
No. As far as permissions are concerned, permission will be needed from Department of Home to the Department of or to that particular or Government Medical College, Department of Pathology, where the grouping is done. So we don't need any permission. Permission will be needed to the Department of Pathology for doing this particular work of medical legal cases, depending on the that particular case.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So the last question I will take, which is from Raman Garam from Burma. In spite of this GR guidelines, the police officer insists on collection of vaginal swab. As you said, there should be a home order in highlighting when to collect the swabs. So probably this particular message was for Dr. Chetri, sir.
Exactly.
If he is there, he can answer. Otherwise, you can answer, sir.
Yeah.
They have not specified basically to whom it is, but just recently the messages pop up here.
Yeah.
So
The guidelines are very clear in our MOHFW booklet regarding this, when to collect
Yes,
and in which cases it should be collected. So the guidelines are very
yes, sir.
clear.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So thank you very much, sir.
Thanks a lot,
Now I
sir.
will-
Organizing secretary, Dr. Mohite sir and his team. Thank you very much for giving me chance to discuss this particular issue. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your presentation, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So now I would like to request the second speaker for the session. The topic is art of giving medical evidence. The speaker is our young dynamic president of Medical Legal Association of Maharashtra, Dr. S.C. Mohite, sir. Before I start, I will just introduce him. So currently, Dr. Mohite, sir, he is working as professor and head of Department of Forensic Medicine at TNMC and Nair Hospital, Mumbai. He is also working as medical superintendent at Nair Hospital, Mumbai. Presently, he is our president of Medical Legal Association of Maharashtra. He was former vice president of Medical Legal Association of Maharashtra. He is nodal officer of multidisciplinary child protection cell and pilot project of UNICEF Forensic Medicine Department. He was also the expert on the MPSC board. He developed one of the best forensic medicine museum in the country at TNMC, which is ISO certification of the department and mortuary services. He held various positions in multiple committees. Also, he delivered multiple orations and lectures in various CMEs and conferences. With this introduction, may I request Dr. Mohite sir to start his presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Naresh. We are coming to the last session of the lectures before the panel discussion. And I thought after the whole exercise is done, we have to give evidence in court. So similarly, what is the art of giving evidence in court, we will see. Okay. So I will just in brief say what is evidence. It includes all statements which the court permits or requires to be made before it by witnesses in relation to matters of fact under inquiry. Such statements are oral evidence. I will not harp on these slides because what is oral evidence, documentary evidence, everyone is aware. Only one thing is about digital or electronic evidence, which is the need of the hour today. Originally, digital or electronic type of evidence was not mentioned or covered under the definition. However, the definition of evidence was amended by the IT Act 2000 to include electronic records within the same. An electronic record includes record generated, data generated, image stored, sound stored, or any information received or sent in an electronic form. Such evidence must be collected with reasonable and least objectionable means. Manner of collection, I will not touch upon. Now, when we say about giving evidence, most of you would understand only giving evidence in court, but it is not so. Evidence is recorded during inquiries. Investigating agencies would call you to give statements. In court of law for court proceedings, many of us give our views in newspaper, electronic medium. What I speak in this conference, webinar, or have WhatsApp chats or emails with personnel from media or otherwise also will be used as evidence. So these are other aspects which we as doctors need to understand. What is the utility of such evidence? The judge or the investigator has to rely on the knowledge and opinion of certain experts in order to appreciate the technical details in various crimes. Evidence is given by the expert of a relevant field. It will supplement the assertions of the judge or investigator, and together they complement each other and combine to form the basis of the judgment. Okay. Who is an expert? So I will not again divulge into the definition of an expert or who is an ordinary witness, because I've got just 10 minutes. What is the importance of medical evidence and why it is essential that we give it in a proper manner? I will speak on. So it is a specialized form of knowledge which is essential in dispensing criminal justice. Layman is not in a position to have medical knowledge without proper education and training. From whatever knowledge we have, we can draw inferences from the facts placed in front of you. Do you have to go to the court? Yes, whenever the court calls, or you might be called as a defense witness by the plaintiff or the defendant. When receiving a request to attend by subpoena, otherwise it is advisable for the practitioner to make contact with the requesting party. Giving evidence can be variable period of time, from 1 hour to whole day or many more days. Like in 2611, I had to give evidence for continuous 5 days. In another murder trial which is going on, where I appeared for 8 days. So it is a very taxing job of giving evidences, and it is not a simple one. What are the preparations you make before giving evidence? It is nothing less than appearing for an examination. And any medical doctor who feels that evidence is very easy and he can just walk in and give evidence is not so. One has to be thorough, like appearing for an examination. So you, just as an exam, you pull out your notes. Here you need to pull out the papers. You might be posted at some other place, so you need to call up someone at that department, get the papers. Now in today's world, it is very easy to get the data. You can ask a reliable person in the department to WhatsApp you so that you can make necessary preparations for it. You have left or transferred. Understanding the case, most importantly, reading the textbook on the topic matter. Many a times people feel I have appeared in case of burns 100 times, murder 100 times, but it is not so. Always it is better to read again and prepare the case and go. Whenever you have received summons, nowadays where people are posted at different places, WhatsApp is an official medium which is used to send you the summons. So you can use this, that. You should always take down the phone number of the IO or the court Karkun who brings you. In case you are not able to attend, not want to attend because of say unpreparedness, or you held up because of emergency, or you want to gather any other information, or you want to interact with the public prosecutor, this would be of help to you. Dress code. I've seen many doctors coming up very shabbily in the court. Not hair not combed, beard grown, clothes not proper. They might be old clothes, not an issue, but they should be ironed properly. Clean dress should be there. Hair should be properly groomed. You always carry many. I have seen people carrying small polythene bags, but it should not be. you should always enter as a dignified person. You should, your gesture or your attire should be that you would command respect. Preferably wear shoes, carry a good bag, have a good bag to carry your documents. One is they are stored properly. There won't be any stains or anything on that. Mannerisms and etiquette. Now, when we go to court, we just carry that piece of paper which you have received as summons and you start searching for the person. As I've said initially, you have the telephone number of the court Karkun who would be there. So once you have reached, you give him a call and say you would be there outside the courtroom in so and so much time. So your manner of entering the court, if you are waiting outside, that way, you tell him to introduce you to the public prosecutor. Now, where to sit in the courtroom? I have seen at times people, if they do not find place, they just go and sit where the accused people are supposed to sit, or wherever you find the place sitting next to the accused or his lawyer. Such things should not be done. There is no problem if you wait outside. So you can wait outside, tell the public prosecutor that you are waiting outside, and you can tell the police constable to call you whenever you are required, not to discuss the case with any unauthorized person or divulge any form of information to anyone apart from the public prosecutor. Manner of entering the witness box. Whenever you are called, your gait, your posture, if you have been outside, just wipe your face, look fresh, comb your hair. Manner of giving preliminary particulars. The way in which you give your particulars, proper pronunciations, spellings, how you take the oath shows your ease and confidence. After you have taken the oath, you should always wish the judge. Just as in practicals or any other case, how you arrange your instrument set, similarly, you should organize your papers on the witness stand. Take your time or ask the court to give you a few seconds so that you can organize your papers. Papers meaning what are the requisitions received from the police or agency, you keep in one bunch. Another bunch would be your postmortem report or whatever case sheet you have. Be polite, but it in an authoritative manner. Introduce yourself, give your visiting card when you have entered to the public prosecutor. Establish your identity. If possible, discuss the case and find out the evidence on which the public prosecutor wants to establish the case. Many a time there are multiple, say a huge tragedy or a bomb blast where there are many doctors who have appeared in the case. So find out if there has been any damage done to the case by the previous witness, what the public prosecutor wishes from you, whether he wants you to cover some points. There are at times the public prosecutor is too work because he has got too many cases. So he would say, Dr. Bola, tum is the evidence. So there you should firmly take into consideration all the points. You can guide the judge to take certain salient features in chief, because sometimes the public prosecutor is not there and the judge himself says, Chala means gyeun takto yachi chief. Many a time PP tells you to give evidence by reading your papers. So you should know how to establish chain of evidence. So you need to start on which day you were on duty, what time you received the papers, when you started the postmortem, with whom, who were with you, whom did you hand over the evidences, bodies, where all you sent for chemical analysis, histopathology, blood grouping, etc. On which days these reports were handed over to you, when did you finalize the cause of death. Your chain of evidence should be in that fashion. If you have gone thoroughly, read the case, you have the full grasp, explain where essential. It will give you respect. The moment when you start explaining, always keep one eye on the defense counsel, whether he is getting a bit jittery or nervous, because you have brought out certain case facts about the case, which will be detrimental to him or which he will have to take up in cross. At times, he might not be prepared for such things which you have brought out in your examination in chief. While giving evidence, be very loud, crisp, and clear. While typing, the typist might not be familiar with the words. So you can gain the sympathy by spelling out the medical words and not leaving to them. Wherever need arises, at times, you can use local language or simple language and appropriate examples to explain to the public prosecutor, to the judge. If important points have been missed, you can bring it forth. For example, swabs, blood investigations kept, etc. To give you a simple example, the previous speaker during his talk, there was a question that was asked, is there any GR about sending blood grouping, etc. It is a routine practice at my center that we, in a case of homicide, we send 2 samples for blood grouping. One is at our blood bank and one is sent to the FSL. Many a times it has happened that the samples which are sent to the FSL turn out to be negative, or they are not able to investigate, but the sample which I have given at my blood bank, it gives a positive report, or it tells me which is the blood group. At times the defense has raised such questions, and I've always, they said this report cannot be acceptable. But I've always explained to the court that this is a FDA approved blood bank where hundreds, thousands of patients, their blood group is analyzed over here, and on the basis of that, blood has been infused to patients and lives saved. So in such cases, the courts have accepted this fact. Many a times multiple victims are there. Say for example, a Hoosh tragedy. Then the PP would decide which victim's case he is going to take. On this day, suppose 5 victims' cases he is going to take. Then examination will happen first. So you have got time. So if you have spoken with the public prosecutor beforehand, which are those 5 cases, you can prepare for those 5 cases. It is like having you have paper 1, paper 2, paper 3 in our MD exam, then you know this question has been asked in paper 1, or this is the syllabus. So it is something like that sort. Now for how to handle the defense counsel. So first find out who is the defense counsel, if preferable, how many accused are in the case, which lawyer is representing which accused, and what are the charges against each one of them. Study the defense counsel just as the defense counsel studies you. The defense counsel in important cases studies you, your bank accounts, to your social media contacts, who are your friends, etc. Study the defense counsel, length of his practices, past clients' cases, his success rate, his attitude towards previous witnesses. Or by this time, the public prosecutor or even the constable says how his attitude has been towards other witnesses. Search archives, you would get any good news, bad news about the PP, defense lawyer, because they search all your social media contacts as well. Manners always of demotivating witness, that is seen. So be polite at the very beginning. Here, let me tell you all that this is not a match where we are there to defeat someone. We are here as people of science to help the judicial officer in giving justice to someone. Okay, the person or the defense counsel, he has obtained advice about you, your education, your academic failures, your wrong deeds, punishments you have received. Recently, in one of the cases where I appeared, the other witness, the defense had taken out so much material when he was penalized for plagiarism and other things. So one needs to be aware that the defense is going to keep a proper eye on you. Keep in mind he has all the knowledge about you, including your family, property, friends, acquaintances. For example, in the recent Antilia case, if you see, now everything about all the witnesses probes. So all these things come. Like a batsman judges the pitch and then decides what stroke to play, okay, or whether he should be on defense. So similarly, a witness should be in that manner, judge what are the questions put forth, whether it is an easy pitch or a difficult one. Before answering, think and have a logical chain. What would be the least likely question? Answer in such a manner that his link of questions is broken. Because you as a medical person, if any other topic or any other subject is also asked, you would be able to answer something. But if you put something about physiology, the person would not know because he has not gained that knowledge about physiology or seek advice on that topic. If he gets irritated by your answers, that means you are on the right track and he is not able to extract from you what he wants to. Divert him to another topic. Let him go to wrong track. If he gets irritated, pacify. Many a times the defense counsel, if you see, have a habit of asking you 1 or 2 relevant questions and an irrelevant question in between. You are a subject expert with years of knowledge and experience. Defense has just read on the previous night or taken expert advice. So you can easily put him on wrong track. At times it is the psyche that disturbs us. That is, the defense counsel would bring a huge pile of books. He might not have read. This is just to psych you. He would place there and you would feel how much he has read and come, or advice he has taken. But these are at times merely to psych you. He might not show you that textbook, not ask you a single question out of it. Don't be disturbed by irrelevant questions put to you. Coolly say, I don't know. In one recent case, I was asked, what is the qualification of Carl Pearson? I said, I do not know. I said, so he said, how come you do not know and you are using his formula? I simply replied, I have read n number of textbooks of different subjects and I do not know everyone's qualification, his family members, his city from where he comes. But I know when this formula is to be used. I said, I have read about Pythagoras formula in maths, but I never bothered to find out. And all of us during that 10th standard had read that. So to certain questions, say a firm no. They might twist the question because for them it is very important and try to extract an answer. But if you are not sure, just firmly say no. Where need arises, be elaborative. And when you are elaborative, if he tries to stop you, that means he do not want you to proceed further on that line because it is going to hamper his evidence. Understand it is going to go against him. So he will try to stop you. You don't stop. If a question is not understood, tell him to repeat. There is no problem. He will fumble because the meaning of the question will change. He may ask you about your past or news article, say, I don't recollect, or I very faintly remember. He will try to discredit you. In big cases, you will also need to know his past, whether he has been barred from practice. From my personal experience, I will tell you, in one of the cases, the defense counsel tried to raise various questions about me. After the evidence was done, I said, sir, this is not a proper manner because I know you were also debarred by your bar counsel for 1 year. But I did not want to bring this over there. He will bring piles of books, as I've said. You can say many a times textbooks are shown to you. Always see the edition. If you have not read a textbook, it doesn't mean that you do not know anything. You can say that you have not read the textbooks or there are other standard textbooks or this is not a proper research-based one. If your evidence is going to last for a few days, you also can carry some non-specific old books and place them in such a manner that the defense will also try to search on next occasion when he comes as to which textbook you are reading. Add tags to the paper, just flip pages with the PP in a subtle manner, which the defense and his juniors will see. So they would think that this doctor is also thoroughly prepared and come. You are there to assist the court and not fighting with the defense. Try to win the defense by your knowledge and promptness. Not only the public prosecutor and the defense, but one also needs to understand the judge. His mood, his attitude towards you, respect or irritated due to your previous absence. It happens many a time. You have been called for evidence, you don't go because you are held up or you are not well. That time the judge is really angry with you many a times. Does he get irritated by your answer? If yes, gather, compose and explain him scientific basis of your answer. Volunteering. Wherever need arises, one should volunteer. If it is refused, tell him meaning the judge, to kindly record his denial. The purpose for this is, I will give you an example. In a case where I appeared, it was a small girl of 7 years old who had gone missing the previous night. Body was found in the afternoon on a summer and the body was decomposed. The defense counsel during the cross-examination asked me, what is the standard time for decomposition? As in all textbooks, I said, usually decomposition begins after 24 hours. And she said, thank you very much. So at that moment, I told the judge I would like to volunteer. My answer is not complete. He said no. So I said, please take it on record, sir, that I wanted to volunteer regarding this time since death. So when I told him that, then he said, you volunteer. And when I explained him and what was the need, then judge sir also understood this. Don't leave without permission and also appear on another date where called for. At times, they might call you in their chamber also to discuss certain things. Giving statements, I said, while any investigating agency, any committee calls you for investigation, Go only after receiving official letter. Record the same in your office record, because all these registers are later on called in court. Be calm, be specific, preserve the copy of statement which you have given, because you will require it to refresh your memory as it will be produced as evidence in court. Be careful. Media appearance. This is one thing which today's generation feels great pride in appearing in media. So be careful while giving statements. These will be used against you by your administration or your defense counsel. General statements to educate the masses is fine. Don't give opinion on burning issues unless you have evidence about the case. If at all, what I practice is when I speak to the media, I send an official WhatsApp message or an email that I have spoken to you and it is related to general topic and not pertaining to any case. However, before printing anything under my name, please send me a copy. If I acknowledge the same, then only print it. This is how I have been handling statements. I've spoken, demeanor. Thank you very much. I think my time is over of 10 minutes. I have exceeded by 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mohite sir, for your brief overview of how to appear in the court of law. This is very useful for most of the delegate, especially the postgraduate students. So thank you very much for your deliberations. So this is all about from this session. So I don't think so there is right now any question in the chat box. So I will hand over to Pawan.
No, Naresh, I will continue. We will continue with
Yes,
the
sir.
panel discussion.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you very much,
Thank you,
sir.
Naresh. Thank you very much. You did a good job. We come to session 6, which is the panel discussion. And let me introduce the panelists to you. Our panelists are Dr. Sridhar Patil. He is MBBS, DFM, MD, currently working as police surgeon. He is currently working as police surgeon and medical legal advisor to Government of Maharashtra since March 2005. He has been honored for Excellent Service Award by CEO Raigad for excellent work in 2005 flood, Mumbai floods for best services and medical legal work during 26/11 terror attacks. Our second panelist is Dr. Saurabh Tripathi, currently DCP Protection, Mumbai, former MBBS graduate of our own alumni, TNMC and BYL Nair Charitable Hospital. He has done his MD Skin and VD from RIMS Ranchi. His earlier assignments included SP at Ahmednagar District. He was DCP Traffic, Eastern Suburbs and DCP Zone 4 in Greater Mumbai. He has won various awards, not only academic, but also cultural and sports events at various national level competitions. We have today Rohini Salian Madam. At presently, Madam is prosecuting Naxalite members on behalf of ATS. Madam has been former Chief Public Prosecutor, Sessions Court, Mumbai. She was Chief Public Prosecutor for Greater Mumbai in 2001. She has been prosecutor under various acts like TADA Act, POTA Act, MCOC Act, UAPA Act, and NI Act. She has conducted cases involving members of Mumbai Underworld, Dawood Gang, and Arun Gauri, just to name a few. Also for various heinous crime like Mulund train bomb blast, MCT bomb blast, just to name a few. We have Mr. Vinod Kumar Menon, currently editor special investigation at Midday Infomedia Limited. He has been in the profession of journalism for the last 24 years with passion for reporting on crime and investigation, forensic medicine, forensic science, public health, public issues, etc. He has received prestigious awards like Ladli Media Award 2017, Rednick Press Club Award 2013, 14, 15, and has been the only Indian investigative journalist at International Visitor Leadership Program in 2016, a program by federal government of USA. He has numerous investigative pieces to his credit, exposes and eye openers that has been cited as evidence in the court of law during trials. We have got Dr. Bhalchandraji Chikalkar, currently professor and head of FMT at Government Grand Medical College and Sir JJ Group of Hospitals. He is currently also working as medical superintendent at GT Hospital, Mumbai during this COVID-19. He was also member of Medical Education Unit, Organ Transplant Committee, Expert Opinion Committee, coordinator of institutions CBME curriculum implementation program. He has various publications in national and international journals. We have Dr. Krishna Kulkarni, Director FSL Mumbai since last 14 years. 12 years he was Deputy Director at various regions in Pune, Aurangabad. Sir has got more than 100 research papers and he is also a PhD in forensic sciences. Dr. Mohan Joshi sir, our own Dean of Sion Hospital, sir was over here with us in the last year. Sir has trained in Korea, Japan, Hong Kong, Africa, Taiwan, China for endoscopy and GI surgery. He is a gastroenterologist, endoscopist with more than 110 papers, 10 chapters in various books. Sir has organized various workshops. He is a faculty in national and international workshops. With this brief introduction of all my panelists, I welcome all of you for this panel discussion. And I would like to start the panel discussions with our police surgeon, Dr. S.M. Patil, sir. So my first question to you, there are 10 postmortem centers under you in the city. Do you feel there is a need to revamp our medico-legal system for forming boards, panels for sensitive cases?
Yeah.
Patil,
Yes,
sir.
You are right, sir. Good evening, all. We have the 10 postmortem centers, but as per the we need forensic medicine. But should be there, we need. In Mumbai, at least we need.
My next question is to Dr. Kulkarni, sir. Sir, is there a need of revamping our forensic science laboratory? Like other laboratories, should they function 24/7?
Yes, sir.
सर माझा प्रश्न आपल्याला आहे की आपली forensic science laboratory, do we need to revamp them and they should be functional 24/7?
Yes, sir, because there is a lack of manpower. There is a huge lack of manpower. Only 50% manpower is present in our laboratory. So it is not possible to, but for in each and every crime scene visit, we are ready to 24 hours. But only for analysis purpose, we are working 10 or 12 hours only in our office. But it is not possible to do work at all 24 hours because there is lack of manpower.
Okay. Sir, are there any newer techniques that have been introduced in our forensic science laboratory recently?
So many newer techniques, sir, were introduced in our laboratory. There are total 10 departments in Mumbai laboratory. Psychological evaluation, new techniques were did in our psychology department. Then in cyber and TASI division, we are doing a lot of research. So we are starting new techniques in our Mumbai laboratory, cyber and TASI. So many thousands of cases were reported. They got conviction in that cases. From Sai Baba case is the first case in whole over India. We got the conviction in our cyber department. So like that, we have reported so many cases in that department. Then psychology, cyber, TASI, and all these are newer department we are starting in our Mumbai laboratory. But we are also starting some mini laboratory. According to that, to police deposit their viscera sample nearby places. So we are starting 5 mini lab in last year. That is Chandrapur, Thane, Solapur, Dhule, Ratnagiri, and 8 regional lab. Total 13 lab. Only Maharashtra is the state who is having this type of infrastructure. 13 lab in Maharashtra. No in any state in India having these types of infrastructure. And 45 mobile support van is available in Maharashtra only, sir.
Thank you, sir. My next question is to Dr. Tripathi. Sir, what are the difficulties faced by the police in postmortems? Is one question. Second is, can the police on its own ask for second postmortem? And if yes, what is the procedure one needs to follow?
Thank you, sir. As far as the first question is concerned, sir, it has basically two ambits. One is regarding the reports, sir. Most important part where police faces the problem is regarding the reports, the clarity of the reports. Sometimes the opinion is reserved. While investigations are, the preliminary report is required for proceeding with the investigation. Basically, it's a homicide or it is a suicide or something like that. So many times there is a delay or there is a delay on part because even the operating, the autopsy conducting person is also not very sure. But sometimes if we get some hint, it always helps us in the investigation and pursuing the evidence and pursuing things. Like it sometimes happens, sir, that if it is a, say, a 306 case, a lady is hanging, either is a strangulation or a hanging is being conducted. If it is a clear-cut hanging case, then fine. Otherwise, if it's a strangulation and we are not getting any line, till the time we get a report, if it's a delayed report, many of the evidences are, sir, misplaced or they are tampered with. So this is one part, sir, while getting the reports. Second part is regarding sometimes the jurisdictional issues arise, whose bodies, where it has to be carried, who would be conducting the autopsy, the timing of the autopsy. Many times, sir, it is a potential law and order situation where a crime has happened. A lot of people are waiting for that thing, and the concern of police is that as far as speedy autopsy can be conducted, it should be done. But because of manpower, because of issues at hospital, we have seen both sides of the story, sir. So many times it is delayed or there are some problems. So because of that, there is a problem faced by police regarding the speeding of expediting the autopsy thing. Then, sir, a lot of ADR reports are pending with us, sir, in the police stations, and a lot of final reports are required for closing the 174 CRPC procedures of accidental death reports. They are pending for years. When I was Zone 4 DCP in Mumbai, that time I think it was in thousands. I can count in just for 7 or 8 police stations. The number goes in thousands, and it basically 5 years later or 6 years later, even the pathological slide or whatever was sent, it is not even traceable on the part of the medical college, and so until unless a final report comes up, these all mudde mal, these all cases, if they have to be disclosed, the problems arising because of this ADR registration, it's always there, sir. So a gambit of things are there. Then, sir, in rural areas, majorly the problem is that mostly the medical officers, they are untrained for giving opinions, and there the problems crops up many a time, that how the evidences has to be sent, how the viscera has to be sent, what the reports are, and a lot many times in courts these problems are raised. The PP raises this problem with police. Okay, this is not proper. It doesn't goes hand in hand with what investigation you are doing already. Even however, if we check many a times our investigation that the circumstances are matching or not, but somewhere if that lousy things creep up, and that goes for even police investigation also. Many times the autopsy report will be saying many things, and the circumstances of police or the investigation may be shabby. I don't blame that thing, sir, but then this is one of the problems where it crops up, especially in rural areas, sir. So these are things, sir, which generally come up. Then a issue is generally for emotional, this thing which in our Indian society has of conducting for autopsies. We have faced a lot of problem because of COVID, sir, handling of COVID bodies. Recently, when in Mumbai it was there, sir. We in fact took out circulars also to resolve the problem. We sat with all the department heads, but sir, these sort of body handling things come up. So in a nutshell, sir, these are the things which generally bother police, sir. The second part is regarding the second PM. Obviously, sir, the investigating officer can always request that thing. It's always obviously with prior permission of the seniors, which generally they take it out. Though they are not very clear cut, as far as I was going through all the previous articles and case rulings, nowhere there is an objection that police officer cannot order that thing. Obviously, even the chief medical superintendents who is involved in the process, the district magistrates in UP, case of state of UP was there, Puno versus state of UP case was there, where even the district magistrate has ordered a very autopsy, and the second autopsy was conducted in that part. So yes, police can do that thing. The investigating officer, if he deems it fit for any reason which is so, he can always conduct that thing. We have done that, but we sparingly use that thing until unless mostly when the relatives are very much, apprehensive about that thing, and something on record is brought for where it shows up that yes, there can be one of the second autopsy. So generally, even police people differ, or the situation is ki law and order situation is creeping up where somebody is taking it out that no, we don't have faith in this particular hospital or in this particular thing, and then because to subvert that situation, we have to refer to that thing. So that time we also request, and many a times by cooperation that is sorted also.
Dr. Tripathi, one more question to you. One part was where the police officer asking for a second autopsy, and second is the other way around where the relatives insist upon a second autopsy. So is that permissible by law, or has law given the liberty for the relatives to ask for a second autopsy after the investigating officer is content with whatever investigations have been done and the autopsy findings?
Sir, personally speaking, sir, as I spoke earlier also, sir, there is no particular law prohibiting that thing, sir. It means,
Okay.
obviously, if the thing is coming up and it's basically investigating officer's thing, even the judge can take a call and he can also reorder a second autopsy. And as far as I feel that if the procedures are not flawed, and if the relatives don't have anything substantial, just a hunch which they feel, so mostly they are generally not sent for, at least from police side, they are generally not sent for second opinion or second autopsy. But yes, sir, if sometimes if it happens that there is a, suppose I'm just citing an example, sir, which I generally faced when I was a DCP here, that there is a place where somebody has been operated or sent, or a particular person was, admitted in a hospital, there only he died. They say that may be a part of negligence or something, and then there is a big mahal created out of that issue, and a lot of law and order situation was there. So in greater good, even the forensic medicine department also agreed that let it be whatever we say, speak of principle of natural justice. We not be the part of that thing, let other person assess that thing independently. And sir, as far as I think, mostly these issues are sorted out by speaking. And that is what, at least in my 11.5 years of experience, we have got it done, sir.
Thank you, sir. My question is to Mohan Joshi, sir. Mohan Joshi, sir, what are the difficulties faced by hospitals in medico-legal cases?
Yes, sir. Dr. Moite Sahib, bola.
Sir, what are the difficulties faced by hospitals in medico-legal cases?
बऱ्याच गोष्टी अशा आहेत, whatever, there are many things which are called as gray areas. Now, if a patient comes and is transferred from private hospital or any other hospital for a higher reason or complication, do we need to make a police case? Is a question. That is one thing. My question, if I could get the answers, one as a surgeon, second as an administrator. Number two, that if a patient is operated for a particular disease and then he succumbs to death, which is a normal natural course surgery, say surgery of duodenal ulcer perforation. Now, any surgery which is a medico-legal accident case and other things where compensations are involved, we are ordinarily doing post-mortem. But a patient who is duodenal ulcer perforation, and if he dies eventually, can we give him cause of death, or is it mandatory to do PM? That is the two questions. Then I will ask some subsequent questions.
Yes, sir. At least in our hospitals, as you said, if there is a surgery that has taken place, it was a high-risk surgery to save the life of the patient. We have taken proper consent. Patient's relatives do not have any allegation. You can give a death certificate with police intimation where they go to the police station, record their statement that they were aware about the seriousness. It was a life-saving surgery. The patient has died and they do not have any allegation against the hospital or the treating doctor. So in that case, if the police gives an NOC, you can certainly give a death certificate.
The third thing, the first question, that whether a patient who is transferred, say for any kind of higher referral or ventilatory support, he has been operated outside, do we need to do mandatorily a police case, and do we need to do mandatorily a post-mortem if that patient dies? Because
sir.
that patient has come from outside.
Yes, sir. We are aware that many a times this has been happening in the past. Now is the time we should bring about changes. Like if a person is poor, not affording, comes from a private hospital, we cannot expect that that hospital will remove the IV line and remove the IV and should transfer the patient. Obviously, if he has come intubated with the IV line, there is no reason just to make an MLC because of that IV line. I think Dr. Saurabh Tripathi will also agree on that issue, and others.
Yeah.
We will be able to avoid unnecessarily medical legal cases, increasing the burden on the police force also.
Yeah. The second and the third question is that there is a very peculiar case wherein there was a BST accident of a young boy. That patient had fractures and he underwent surgery for the first time, stayed for a month or so. Number two, that this patient underwent a second surgery and then he again was discharged, and after about 3 or 4 months or even after 6 months, he got admitted. Now, for the first time when he was admitted as a case of BST bus accident, a police case was made. He went home uneventfully. He had some Eliza Rao fixators put. Then second time he came, then some other small surgery was done and he was sent home. And third time he came for a plastic surgery of a flap. This time there was no police case made. He was quite cachexia. And then he was referred to us for some feeding procedure. We did that, but we found that he was very bad. Then he was taken up in our ward. And this patient eventually died because of bilateral bronchopneumonia. The patient's relatives were of Muslim religion, and they said that they do not want post-mortem as as in the Muslim religion, it is preferred that the body is not touched, at the time of burial. So they themselves wrote down a sort of father wrote down that they have no problem if you give cause of death, and he has been suffering for a long time. And the moment we did that, and then after some days, they realized that they wanted to file a case against BST. And it was stated that it was given as natural cause of death. And then their lawyer issued us a notice stating that please submit the PM report. If the PM is not done, why it was not done, kindly explain. And then there was a very big article in the newspaper also, which they brought it out, that please correct, and it was a mistake on the part of the doctors to give this as a natural death. And they did not do PM, and the patient is suffering because he's not getting any kind of sort of reimbursement, or he is not getting any settling of the claim by BST. So this was the situation. So what is the peculiar advice in this particular case? I would request you to highlight on that.
Sir, this case is very simple, just as in case of stricture following, say, acid ingestion, where person dies because of cachexia. Here also similar way, cachexia due to following so and so. If it is, you can connect the whole event from the accident till the terminal event, then it can be established even without a post-mortem report. Thank you, sir. I will go on to Dr. Chikalkar. And Dr. Chikalkar, you are in JJ Hospital as head of department. What are the, you receive many cases of negligence and also for second opinion referred to your hospital. How do you handle such matters? Who forms the committee? Who are the members of the committee?
Number one, thank you, Mohite sir. The negligence cases, usually the postmortem, there are two types, where the postmortem is done outside and only for the opinion of negligence, the case is referred to the Dean of Grand Government Medical College. There is a government GR that whenever a case of negligence is there, the Dean or the civil surgeon should form a committee, and this committee should have that subject experts and forensic expert. The committee should review the case and should give the report within 2 weeks. Usually, this committee is formed by the Dean of the medical college. By reviewing the case, the experts are appointed, and after this committee, if they need any papers, documents, these are called, and after perusal of the paper, the opinion is submitted to the Dean, and through Dean it is submitted to the respective investigating agencies. Now, some cases are referred for postmortem with allegation of the negligence, especially from the outside periphery. When these cases are brought by the investigating officer, local committee is formed from the department, and the postmortem is performed. And after doing the postmortem and after the investigation, the cause of death is given. And for the opinion of the negligence, again, this case is referred to the Dean, and that is to be referred by the investigating officer, and again the procedure will be formed in the same way by the Dean. Second thing is about the re-postmortem cases. This re-postmortem case, there are no clear-cut guidelines as such in which cases the re-postmortem is mandatory and what should be the protocol to be followed of the committee members. When these cases are brought, usually the higher authority from the investigating agencies, they send a requisition letter, and after receiving that requisition letter, usually qualified persons and 1 or 2 resident doctors, that team will conduct the postmortem. Suppose if the first postmortem is done by the assistant professor, then a senior person is appointed for the re-postmortem examination. But before that, all the papers and what are the indication why the case was referred is studied. Previous postmortem report is also considered. The findings are confirmed, and then subsequently, after all the reports are received, then the final cause of death is given.
Thank you, sir. My question is to Madam Salian. Madam, what are the expectations of the judiciary from a medical witness?
Yes, sir. So first of all, sir, we as advocates, we have to do justice for our briefs. So we are getting a charge sheet which is filed by the police after thorough investigation, and that charge sheet contains all the efforts which you people have taken, all the experts, all the doctors, scientists, and witnesses statements, direct, indirect evidence, documentary evidence. We have to present it before the court. The court expects us to do, it should be by unbiased material in a legal manner. The relevant and admissible evidence should be presented before the court. So how do we do it? We do it through the oral evidence of the witnesses, those who are available. And we do it through the documentary evidence like post-mortem reports, all pathological, chemical, all examination reports of you people. And finally, we have to use all sorts of material, corroborative material present before the court. So the court finally comes to a conclusion saying that if there is this is proved beyond reasonable doubt. Now, what are we proving? We are proving the facts of the case. Facts are through the witnesses. So the experts are also witnesses, but we call them expert witnesses because CRPC Evidence Act puts them in a better pedestal. Their evidence should be considered, and it is always relevant. And the judge will ask the assistance of the doctors who are experts to finally conclude his decision whether the man is guilty or not. So your efforts are most important for us in criminal trials. And not only this is relevant without even proving the document. There are provisions wherein you people will not come to the court, but I can present it to the court under section 293 and 294, saying that I am dispensing with the presence of this doctor, the expert, and this should be taken as genuine. And if the defense says we don't admit it as genuine, then only court sometimes calls for the doctor. So this is a little retrieve for your people. So sometimes they challenge that. When we are challenging a document, the document may be false. The fact which is written there, the report which is given by the expert, by examining he's following all the procedural methods, it will be under cross-examination. And there the defense will try to nullify the efforts of the doctor, saying that you are not an expert. So what the court expects is the expert, whoever comes, he should assert himself that he is an expert. Now, how do we do that? Now, he is an authorized person, first of all, to give evidence before the court, and he is an expert in this subject. He is knowledgeable in that subject, and he knows all the citations and the precedents earlier, and he is member of some association. He should establish that whatever he has written in the report is true and correct on the scientific base. So he is a science. If the science, that particular science is advanced, and there is no challenge to certain sciences, so that will be taken as evidence. So he is a relevant witness. So all experts are relevant witnesses. We are not saying truth is something different. Facts should be proved by the witnesses, and here is an expert witness and an ordinary witness. He is put under another pedestal. So unless the expert who asserts himself and he impresses upon the court that he says whatever he says is based on science, that sort of evidence will be accepted by the court. Otherwise, the defense will tackle him and nullify his credentials. This is what is happening in the court. Therefore, thorough preparation should be done by the experts. They should come and meet us. Normally, they don't do, most of the experts, because they are too busy. And sometimes I myself try to interact with them, because I being a lay woman and the judge being a layman, we have doubts. We don't know the science, but we know a little academic points only. We would like to learn from doctors before putting them into the box. If the doctor is thoroughly prepared, it will be easier for him to stand in the court. So that's how we prove the case, and we are all doing the same thing, trying to do justice to a breed, justice to the society, justice to the nation.
Thank you so much, madam. With your
Thank you.
vast experience, could you suggest a few changes to strengthen our present medico-legal system, whereby we as doctors would give a better evidence? One suggestion is well taken, that the public prosecutor and the doctor at least should meet for a brief period of time and decide upon what are the evidences we are going to place before the honorable court to substantiate our case.
That's right. Now, sir, first thing, without interaction with the police, with the doctors, experts, all the witnesses, we can't do anything. We are somebody new comes to before us. We have not known this person. So at least we have to understand how he can perform in the court, because we have restraints. The constraints are there. We can't ask leading questions. There we have to be asking in a particular manner. Even if I know that somebody's name, I have to ask, what is your name?
Yes.
What are you doing? I know he's a doctor. This is how we are taking the evidence. So some witnesses get irritated, the educated ones mostly. They think that we are just mocking. It's not so. There is a procedure, we have to follow it. And that little idea of how the court functions, we tell them before going into the box. So how to react? Am I audible, sir?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Yeah. And how to take the defense questions, how to answer, how much to answer. Mainly, a question is simple, but the expert keeps on answering a lengthy statement, where he will get cross-examined for days together. Because some of the advocates have the habit, they will just tire the witness by asking irrelevant, inadmissible questions, and we fight in the court, try to protect the witness. This takes so much of time and delay. So I would suggest that first of all, interaction is very important, and to understand the court proceedings, that is important. And not only that, thoroughly preparation of his subject in which he is going to give evidence. That should be very, very important. Otherwise, the faith on an expert will be loosened by the court.
Thank you, madam. Thank you, madam. My next question is to Mr. Vinod Menon. In the recent cases, to name one was in the SSR, where on TV channels we saw handwriting experts, fingerprint experts coming and opining about ligature mark. So my question is, how does the media decide upon whom to call as an expert on various channels or take their opinions?
Thank you, Dr. Moite. You have given a very interesting point you have raised in the question itself. The fact that comes along with any celebrity or any sensational case that comes to the media, every second person that is available out there want to talk about his or her expertise. So all of a sudden, everyone becomes an expert who is available, and whoever the channel calls in, they are ready to talk about anything without realizing that anything that you talk about has also to be corroborated in the court of law under the Indian Evidence Act. So the problem here is people want to talk, they become an expert. And when you don't have the required qualification to be called or tagged as an expert under Section 45 of the Indian Evidence Act, where expert opinions are given weightage in the court of law during trial. And if somebody claims that he is an expert of a handwriting expert, or if he is a forensic expert and is talking about ligature mark, wherein he is not qualified doctor to comment about ligature, so that becomes impersonation, and impersonation itself is an offense in the court of law. Now the problem here is, like, over the period of time when we came in as cub journalists almost 23-25 years back, we were fortunate enough to learn from actual stalwarts, whether it was Dr. Franklin, whether it was Dr. Busale, Dr. Mohanty, Dr. Uppe. These were the names who we could recall, and we would always cross-verify, reconfirm before it goes in paper. But ever since the breaking era has come in, the era of breaking news, the problem here is, like, you break the news first, then you try to apologize, and the concept of apologizing also has gone haywire now. So we must understand that anything that we put in paper and print, or anything that you show on television, number one, we are answerable to the court of law, because the Constitution protects the journalist under Article 19(1)(a) for not disclosing the sources when he or she does the story. But when they bring it out in open, they need to stand by their content or the story, because it adds on to the credibility of the journalist, it adds on to the publication credibility. So I feel like the irony today is that every second man out on the street want to talk about forensic, they talk about ligature. And in SSR case especially, there were a lot of laymen who were explaining, putting the dupatta on their neck, taking video, showing how the knot was tied, why there could not be a specific ligature that was seen on SSR neck at that point in time. we were fortunate enough that in that process and over enthusiasm, no innocent person actually got hung. We were fearing because the way they had actually put the dupatta on their neck, we thought like, there would be innocent people who might just try to hang themselves in the over enthusiasm of proving that the case is right or wrong. This is something which is absurd.
Thank you. My next question is to Dr. Mohan Joshi, sir. Sir, many medico-legal cases get admitted to your hospitals. Joshi, sir? Joshi, sir? Meanwhile, I'll take another question which has come. This has come from Dr. Mahadev Bansal. Joshi sir is back. Sir, I will ask you a question. I am speaking to Mr. Vinod Menon, who is the city editor of Midday, and he spoke about experts. Now, sir, in our hospitals, how do you tackle media who insist on photographs and interviews of patients in MLCs? They come for coverage of stories and they would wish to interview the patients, take photographs in the hospitals. So do hospital policies permit this? Sir, please unmute yourself.
See, ideally, the photography of the patient should not be allowed. Media should be kicked out of the hospital, especially to take photograph, because people have become very sensitive. Media takes it. Media cannot produce any photo from a private hospital, say Hinduja, Lilavati or Nanavati or Reliance Foundation Hospital, unless they take a written consent from the patient. There is no question. But here, being a lax security and the people are taken granted, they go on taking photographs. Even Dr. Mohite, you know that when I was dean in Nair and a triplet was photographed and was put into Bombay Mirror, the father of the child objected very seriously that why my children have been put into a sort of a photograph in the Mumbai Mirror or something like that. So I think that the privacy of the patient has to be protected, whether he is in free hospital or otherwise. Inside photography should never be allowed unless you have taken permission and consent from the patient, which I think that it is very important. No media is able to put any photograph of anybody from private hospitals. So therefore, the same has to be applicable to in public hospitals.
My next question would be to Mr. Vinod Menon. Mr. Menon, sir has said that patient's privacy is to be protected and no photographs to be done. It happens at times that the patient's relatives call you, with everyone having a smartphone. They would on their own click photographs and send to you as a media personnel, saying that this is what is happening to me, and you kindly publicize my story in your paper. So in this situation, how do you handle the issue?
So normally the media is not bound by any gag order coming in from any hospital or any dean of the hospital who is also the head of the institution. The gag order normally comes in from the court of law, and Rohini Salim ma'am will be agreeing to it when specific cases come in, when the court specifically says it's an in-camera thing. So when that particular directives come, when there's a gag on particular article or particular content to go in publication, we do take precaution. But as far as a public hospital, these days, private hospital invite, they have got official public relation team hired only to give publicity to the kind of cases that is happening. So it's all about convenience. If today, if Nair Hospital has done a big story or a big surgery, they want to tom-tom it, they invite. It doesn't happen with the kind of convenience. It goes both the way. So when a patient's relative have a photograph, and these days, every citizen is a citizen journalist. So they take the picture, they send it across. But as far as law is concerned, it is not binding on the publisher or the editor or the writer, because It's a third party who is part of it. He's witnessing something and he has seen the picture, or he may be related to a patient in the BMC run hospital. He feels it is worth enough to be shared to the media. So that is where the media decides whether to put it, not put it, what are the censorship that the media should be taking, particularly if there are something like, sexual abuse under POSCO. Because the guidelines are very clear under POSCO. You are not supposed to put the photograph. You're not supposed to name the child. Section 228A of the Indian Penal Code is very clear about the kind of consequences that can happen if the publication writes those things. So if you also recall, POSCO cases do come to this kind of hospitals, but that refrain happens from the responsibility of the editor and the journalist who decides to not go ahead because the dictates are very clear. So the print or the television will follow certain gag order coming in from the court, and that is what is abiding on us, not otherwise anything else.
Thank you so much. Madam, your last word on this?
We have a special provisions saying that if the prosecution feels that the evidence should be protected and the witness should be protected, we have in-camera proceedings. And if at all anybody publishes about it by hook or crook, they will be punished. That is a clear-cut dicta is there. But sometimes the media people try to browbeat us and try to take that evidence, because if it is in the interest of the witness, we have to protect the witness and it should not go to the public. And it is only between the court and the defense and the prosecutor. And court will decide whether he should gag or not. That should be an application.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Now the next question is to both Dr. S.M. Patil sir and Dr. Tripathi sir. There are many bodies which are not being disposed of in this COVID time and lying in the hospital mortuaries. The number of cases are on the rise. There are many unclaimed bodies which were COVID positive, say roadside people who have been brought. So Dr. Patil and Dr. Tripathi, how should we handle this issue? Because we do not know what would happen in the future. Our mortuaries would be full and there would not be any space for us to keep other bodies. Dr. Patil, can you please begin?
Okay, sir, you are right. So you are the right point. But nowadays, the bodies are disposing immediately with the COVID positive. The body disposing immediately. Unknown bodies, unclaimed bodies, are the police have to keep to investigate before disposing the body. The COVID bodies are not keeping even corporation also. So I think Tripathi sir knows so why the bodies are lying in the Nair sign in KEM. So only we got the because of why bodies are not disposing in the Nair sign and KEM. So other postmortem centers, as usually in Rajawadi, Star, Super, JJ, they have the capacity. The only thing I heard last 2 months back in AM disposing with this problem because of that thing. The only thing Tripathi sir knows, I think the unknown bodies keeping because of 3 to 4 days as per the 99 GR. The keeping the 15 days, 1 month, 20 days. The only thing the police notice should be go. The IO should see the thing why the bodies are not disposing in the particular police stations. So
Patil sir, there is one question which has come which says that it is more than 2 to 3 months that it has been written to you. Nothing has happened about disposal of the bodies. So I would ask Dr. Tripathi also, in such cases, what should be the hospitals doing? To which exact higher authority should one write? The hospital administrator should write for disposal of bodies, awaiting for more than a month. Dr. Tripathi, please.
Sir, I had this discussion at length with, I had 2 big hospitals with me when I was zonal DCP, Sion Hospital and KEM with me in Zone 4. And so there are many aspects of this thing. First of all, let us just talk about the legal thing which is being put. Sir, the normal disposable of unclaimed body, whom no relative is claiming, is obviously with the police. There is a government GR for disposal of that. But when it comes to corona, the COVID affected patients we are talking about, everybody is just looking into whose responsibility is whose, and we are trying to push. I'm speaking from both sides. I'm not from either from this side or from that side. My only one question is there when the thing was put up very clearly. Who is actually handling up the body and how that body is going to be disposed of? Do we expect a normal police constable who is not trained, who is maybe a 12th class person, which is the eligibility, to handle a corona positive body, get it disposed of on its own without any assistance from anybody? And in that situation, it will be handling for hundreds of body, and it will not get the concern affected, where there is no PPE kit, no training, no other medicines, no prophylaxis, nothing is being given. So this issue I brought up with the concerned authorities who were there. And then we were speaking about the GRs also. I think, sir, if actually how the body should be, disposed of with respect in this thing is how the other countries and other states are monitoring that. There is a proper disposal. You provide the manpower of how those bodies are not in one center. They can be taken up because the numbers are very high. You take up assistance of, it should be a concerted effect of the concerned mortuary, the BMC staff, and the policemen. If you require us, some particular Samshan Bhumi is there, it has to be taken, some NGO for last rites or something has to be taken up. Yes, we are owning up that thing and we can go ahead with that. But as far as handling of that body safely for disposal, till the point it starts from mortuary or from your ward till the Samshan Bhumi or the crematory places which we have to reach, that has to be taken care of from the experts or the person who is at least trained in that. So there these issues have come up. There the thing which has to be sorted out, it was not sorted out every time. It's just one letter from this side, other letter from this side, that is going up. And then mutually, I know personally myself that thing first-hand experience is with me on that part. Then we spoke with few good people from this side, from that side, and we got most of the bodies disposed of. Maybe again the same because the second phase has come up, sir. So maybe again this concordance has come up, and maybe that is one of the important reasons that's why it's not going on.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Another important question is with the number of homicides, especially when it takes a bigger turn and appears in media, that is the time only many people, police officers want the doctors to visit the crime scene. Now, this question was open to all the panelists. My question is, I remember I had delivered one lecture at Crime Branch when Madam Meera Borwankar was Joint CP Crime that time. And she had floated the idea of homicide investigation squad. In fact, for 5 regions, she had deputed members, she had come out with a circular, but that probably did not materialize ahead. Should we at least suspected homicides and homicide cases for the city form a homicide squad, whereby people from forensic medicine of that concerned postmortem center, as well as FSL team with the investigating officer should immediately, because what has been seen in the recent past is the crime scene is being visited after 3 days, 4 days. Our teams coming from other agencies also visit after 15 days or a month, which actually does not give that much substantial evidence which one would get immediately after visiting. So I require opinion of all the panelists.
Yes, sir, you are right. Mohita sir, you are very right. Very good point with you. Recently now, forensic should be upgradation. So my aim is that yesterday, Sri sir told the scene of crime, what we are seeing in the as usual is telling before postmortem, any sensitive cases in Mumbai, the city always the FSL is visiting first, then the forensic is going the second. So why not the FSL and forensic team along with the police? Then the collection of the samples will be better. After the 2 days they are going the forensic expert. So for my request, FSL director also have to be advised. You can take the forensic team, whichever the concerned postmortem center. We have the experts. Every postmortem there is a MD forensic doctors are there. If there is an IO, it's a sensitive case. So they can take FSL with forensic expert. Then before going the postmortem, it is my
Yes, yes. It is good idea, sir. Because in so many cases, I am calling directly to doctors, postmortem center. So please come and visit to this place. Because this is important to visit you. Because something is not, that is very crucial, crime scene is there. At that time, so many times, I am giving suggestion to my team to call the postmortem doctor.
Yes. Continuing, any other panelist would like to add?
Coordinated efforts are required for crime investigation, and the expertise and the knowledge of all the concerned should be taken into account, and it should be materialized. I think central policy is to be decided for this crime scene investigation. Another thing, Dr. Moite sir, about disposal of the dead body is really concern. You had raised a good question on that. Many bodies are lying for disposal. It is not only the respect to the deceased, but also respect to the live persons who are in the mortuary. What Sir Saurabh sir has said about the handling of the dead body of COVID positive, what MOHFW guidelines, it states that when the body is sanitized and packed in the body bag, and it is sanitized from outside, even PP kits are also not required as per the MOHFW guidelines to carry that body with the packed body bags, which is sanitized from outside. I think this disposal of the dead bodies is really a issue. We will also help the police persons. If needed, we'll train, we'll provide the kits, whatever is available. But it should be taken on priority basis because there is no space in the mortuary. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, Moiteji, I would like to add over here
Please,
about
please.
the very concept of forensic. The irony that we people are in today is that unlike the Western country where forensic is given a very crucial importance as far as criminal justice system is concerned, unfortunately in India and Maharashtra, the forensic department, forensic science, forensic medicine is not given importance at all. That mindset need to change because the very fact ever since the coroner system got abolished, we have been observing, and there are numerous cases that have been reported by me in the newspaper where death have gone unnoticed. Now, the classic example is the case of Versova. Dr. Moite and Dr. Patil will be aware about the high-level committee that was formulated to investigate the mysterious death of Chaugle brother and sister, which was also finally proved by Mr. Kulkarni's team of toxicology that the death was suspicious and there was indeed case of in the toxic content of aluminum phosphide that was consumed by the brother and sister. What happened to the case? All the 25 questions that you people had raised in, the questions went unanswered. I'm saying forensic team can only be a successful tool for investigation as well as for getting justice to make the criminal justice system workable, provided as we have written about the homicide squad, which was started by Madam Meera Borwankar, and I had spoken to her personally. She said there was a reason for it because the kind of crime that was happening during her tenure insisted that like all departments should work together. Now, when I was doing that article, at the same time, after her retirement, the new IPS officer, I don't want to take names over here, he said, like, Vinod, you should understand system changes, rule changes, everything changes when the new team of set of people come in. I feel it should never happen that way. The rule should be there in place and it should be followed, and it's in the larger interest of the criminal justice process. And that can only happen not after 4 days Kulkarniji's team is going to inspect a crime scene, or Dr. Patil's team has not even done a dummy test of a crime scene to prove if there was a suspicious death or not. Because every single death is to be investigated, every single death or mysterious death, and every life for that reason is very precious. And every death should be probed thoroughly. And the homicide squad is just the beginning of it. But unfortunately, we are not serious as far as implementation of forensic science, forensic medicine, and crime scene investigation is concerned. This is my personal view.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr.
So
Vidar.
what the thing is that in Maharashtra, in Maharashtra, we are having three types of the postmortem. One is public health, one is DMRE, and one is urban development. So urban development is having only in Mumbai, in Maharashtra, only in Mumbai, in BMC. In other Maharashtra, there is no any corporation postmortem, only DMRE and public health. The public health will conduct the 80% postmortems. The 20% will conduct the DMREs. And the only BMC is concerned is only Mumbai, Greater Mumbai, the BMC is conducting the postmortem. That is the only I want to request the Mohit sir and the Tripathi sir to go to the government. Who will the form the sensitive cases board, or the dean, or the in charge of the police surgeon, or the concerned DCP sir, who will constitute the board to go for the sensitive cases for the things. Recently, what is happening is there is no any circle, there is no any guidelines for go for the committee. So the in charge medical officer and superintendent of medical officers and police surgeon, and sometimes the DCP will tell us go for a team postmortem to the team doctors and go for the postmortem. So my thing is that as per the recently they are asking why the public health, why the DMRE, and why the urban development, not giving the instruction to the go for the committee. If they want to do committee, this circular should be there in a BMC, it's the public health department. There should be some guidelines from the government of Maharashtra and even police department also. So, sir, because the thing is that who is given you permission to make committee during the any sensitive cases? So we are only taking the responsibility and we are making the committee and doing the postmortem.
Mohit sir, to add on to what Patil sir is saying, the simple logic here is like after the coroner system, which was a quasi-judicial body, and the coroner had the power of the magistrate, he could ask in for any autopsy to be conducted wherein he suspected the reason of death. But unfortunately, after 1999, the abolishment of the Coroner Act that has happened and the postmortem centers have come up, the whole power has been given to the Assistant Commissioner of Police. But the problem is not a single death has been certified by any of the assistant commissioner because nobody wants to take the onus on their head. So the problem here is the very fact, how can death go unnoticed and how is a mysterious death where finally the people involved or the perpetrators involved are booked and presented before the court of law. Justice have to be done for the dead person or the mysterious person, like we gave example of Chogle sibling. So they yeah, sorry, carry on.
So now I wish to, because 2-3 things have come up and related to police, so I just like to see on both sides. First of all, sir, as far as I understand, what police has this thing, and in fact law also, mostly they seek medical fraternity as a person who controls themselves, mostly for SOPs or something like that. They generally don't intervene. As far as many laws I have seen, many things I generally see, they generally don't intervene. So if any self-regulation regarding autopsies, if any self-regulation regarding, you know, how the mannerism of how it should be done, should we go back to the coroner's court as Menenji is telling, or should we go back to that thing? It has to be formulated in form of law. Why are we depending upon rules? Why not to have a committee of doctors like I was discussing previously? Why do we need to dissect every body when we have 3D CT scanners for understand for the PM report analysis? Most of the thing are pathological autopsies which we are conducting. Why can't we be vocal about that? Let people's representative who represent us to go give memorandums to them and let them enforce a law rather than going about the rules. Rules are just to mention how the act should, you know, be implemented on ground. They are not the case itself. Even the courts also, if they rule out their case laws, they are for particular instance or the particular type of things. Here, what we are discussing is it needs a big lobbying and making people aware, people who matter, to take it up for enacting laws. Police does not have the power of enacting the law. We can send recommendation. There are enough number of recommendations which have been sent. This is part one of the problem which we are discussing. Second part is regarding, I think everybody ideally agrees on that forum and not a single person who will be a doctor or any police personnel who will say, you know, forensic doctors or forensic medicine doctors or forensic science laboratory people are not welcome on the scene of crime. Quote me a single instance where a FSL by its own self have gone or a forensic medicine doctor has gone to visit the site and any police personnel or person related to investigation has objected of it. No, the issue comes up because when in night 2 o'clock, when night 3 o'clock, when the call will come for any homicide, and I'm not talking about only in Mumbai. Mumbai, see, Menonji, you are looking into Assistant Commissioner of Police. The same power is delegated when you go to Mufassir to the SDM. He is looking after the power as the sub-divisional magistrate of disposing of with 174 CRPC. The problem is not the post; it's regarding things which is happening now. What we need, everybody understands that there should be it's a teamwork. Whole criminal judicial system is a teamwork of investigators, of prosecutors, of judges, and medical personnel are helping them as expert witness. Forensic science laboratory people also doing the same thing. So my thing is, are we monitoring at our end that how many people are actually attending those things, how many calls have come up? If you talk about foreign countries, they have homicide unit, and I don't have any out of doubt with you on this part that homicide unit should be there as it is in foreign countries. But here the same police investigator has to handle law and order in daytime. He has the same number of officers with him. He only has to, if whoever is the nearest for any murder, he has to reach there and he has to. Even Mumbai is having 55,000 police. There we are talking about these things. Imagine I was a district SP of 17,000 square kilometer area district where I had only 3,000 persons or hardly 100 officers with me. So yes, and everybody cannot be well versed. Whatever you speak, everybody cannot be well versed with the things. I will not quote a place. In a very sensational case, I asked for help for forensic science laboratory to come up. It took them 5 hours to come. 5 hours, I'm telling. 5 hours to just tell me that they will be coming up. They turned out next day. I'm not blaming anyone because there were logistic problems with them. The assistant director, whoever was there was not at time. The vehicle was not there. The place was godforsaken and very out. But what I respect is see, teams at local level and mostly all investigating officers are doing informally. What you are asking is to need to formalize these things. A forensic science laboratory personnel, a doctor, readily availability of that personnel. If they are there, it is always welcome. Mostly things have fallen out when things have not come up that way. And obviously I don't rule out. Whenever I say this thing, I say again, I add up. It's not so that even police personnel or the investigating officer is totally bulletproof and he will not be doing anything. Yes, there may be, but the percentage is very less. Many a times I have seen my investigating officer fumbling because they are at all not aware of what is written in the report. They get the forensic report or from laboratory or from the forensic medicine, and they are just asking me because I am a doctor, sir, iska matlab kya hai? What should I do with this thing? I'm not able to proceed how to go. So I think, as Sir Moite sir always says, that it is regarding educational purposes also. It is on-job education, which keeps on going.
To answer that, Mr. Tripathi, 1 minute, let me just clarify this. Kulkarni Saab today has got more than 48 mobile vans, which is one of the best things. You have scientists over there. We have the Maharashtra Forensic Science University. You have students who are studying there coming out of the university. My simple concern is we have more than 11 for postmortem centers today. One van in each of these centers will make a lot of changes, because today what is happening, police are doing the courier job. That is not police job.
Exactly. I agree.
Police is not supposed to be courier. Police is supposed to do a quality investigation. Mr. Kulkarni will agree to this. Out of 48, 11 van is standing out next to the postmortem center. For blood grouping, the team of forensic experts are already there inside that laboratory. Number two, the viscera that has been preserved, the viscera need not go to the police station because they don't have the cooling facility. Cooling facilities inside Mr. Kulkarni's van, mobile van. Yeah. So what happens? You are sealing the sample very correctly. It is done as per the forensic requirement. The team of scientists in each vehicle, you read 1 or 2 person. Your blood grouping can be done immediately, hand it over. You can immediately, instead of it going all the way to the FSL, you have a report ready on the spot. Alcohol testing can be done immediately. You don't even have to send it to state FSL. The point here is when you have a dedicated team. Now, for instance, every police station is divided to the region. Now, the point of homicide squad that was being talked about by Meera Borwankar when she was also the joint CP was Mumbai today has got 5 medical colleges. One is a government medical college, and you have the rest of the BMC run medical college. We are not saying that every case you are supposed to get in the forensic team and others. No, we are saying since all these medical colleges have experts, you have forensic laboratory which is on wheels today. Yeah, what is happening? The additional commissioner gets a call about a heinous crime or a sensitive case. All you have to do is that you mobilize the regional team of homicide squad, which includes forensic surgeon, which includes forensic scientists, which includes your fingerprint expert, which includes your photographers, everybody together. what happens, the beauty of that is like when all of these team people reach one particular location, for example, the SSR case, because SSR happened to be a celebrity, there was entire kind of cock and bull stories that started coming out. The whole media started taking the lead into the investigation, which was not a lead into investigation. It derailed the whole way the perspective happened, and then it came into politics. I am saying that should not happen. I am saying this very thing because we have the resources, but the resources are not being utilized. Sorry.
Thank you, Vinod. Point well taken. Some of the points which I wanted to conclude, you have concluded. Okay. Y'all all have been a lovely panel.
On request, as per the Tripoli Circle, the postmortem reports are not getting.
Yes, sir. I will summarize the whole thing. I will summarize, sir. All of you had been brilliant. Y'all are all experts in your field. Y'all have given valuable inputs. I would just like to summarize all of them. First and foremost, we should see to it that all the doctors submit their report in 48 hours. Even if they are submitted in 48 hours, whether they are picked by the police or no is a different thing. But for that, I have a system in our very own country. Calcutta Police has a website on which the relative can just put in his phone number and find out whether the postmortem report is ready or no. Probably we will take a lesson from that. I will be putting up the brief points which have come in the meeting and put it to the state, saying that these are the things we can do for our state, whereby we can change our medical legal system a bit. Training of doctors, as Dr. Tripathi said, he himself being a doctor, he knows where it lacks, but it was happening previously. Now with the new CBME curriculum, probably the new generation of doctors who would come out would be more efficient in conducting autopsies. Dr. Mohan Joshi sir said about unnecessary postmortems, post-surgery to be avoided. I very much agree to him. Not only that, very many unwarranted MLCs are made that we will do about. One more thing with Dr. Chikalkar, which brought out that there are no specific postmortem guidelines related to second postmortem. So we need to write to the state that not only about that, but about various other things. That is who, as Dr. Patil pointed out, and Mr. Vinod Menon said, with coroner he had the powers. Now here there is no one who knows or has the power to form a committee or a panel. So the government needs to come out. So as a president of the association, I would write to the health minister, to the home minister, stating that these are the things which will be required in our case. Well taken point about virtual autopsy, which will be the future, which you would see. Most importantly, we all are with a common intention of giving justice to people. It cannot be only a doctor, only a police officer, or only a forensic scientist. It has to be a consolidated effort. We need to train our investigating officers that wherever you feel suspicion or a homicide, you please call the doctor on duty and the FSL people. For point well taken, guidelines for disposal of COVID bodies is already there, which Dr. Chikalkar also said. We need to have a consolidated effort put in, can rope in NGOs, and at least for the present moment, dispose of all the bodies which are awaiting disposal in the state. One important point, which I think we will take with Dr. Kulkarni, is whether really these vans, out of those 48, even if we have got 10 vans which can be stationed at each postmortem center, the work of our FSL lab also would decrease. Let us see how we can make, whether it is possible or no. If no, then to acquire such vans, we can make an appeal to the state government. Thank you very much. All of you had been a brilliant panel. Thank you so much. My pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for nice organization.
Thank you.
Nice
Thank you,
organization.
sir. Well organized.
Thank you, Patil sir. Thank you, Saurabh sir.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Salin madam.
We will start with.
Thank you, Vinod Kumar ji.
Thank you. Take care, Chikalkar.
Kulkarni sir, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Only madam.
Now we will have the
Thank you.
valedictory function, whereby we will first have the prize distribution.
ओके ओके त्यांनी ते व्हेंटिलेटर लावलं का बर चालेल थँक्यू
Thank you.
कोण बनवतोय स्पॉन्सरची स्पेलिंग येत नाही.
Next, this prizes have been sponsored by Dr. Manoj Gupta. Poster presentation, UG students, first prize goes to Mohit Kumar from TNMC, a prize of 1,000 rupees cash. Next. Next, please. The first prize goes to Akash Sethi from GMC Baroda, a prize of 200,000 rupees cash. Next. Poster presentation, PG students, second prize goes to Dr. Harith Saab from RG Kar Medical College, Calcutta, and the prize is rupees 1,000. Next. First prize goes to Jaya Vasist, SSMC Reva, cash prize of 2,000 rupees. Next. Poster presentation for the faculty. The second prize goes to Dr. Pragnesh Parmar from AIMS Hyderabad, cash of 1,000 rupees. Congratulations. Next, first prize goes to Dr. Sashank Tyagi from GSMC Mumbai, cash of rupees 2,000. Next. Next, oral presentation in postgraduate category. Second prize goes to Dr. Rutuja Kanekar, LTMMC Science. Many congratulations. Cash prize of rupees 1,000. Next, and the first prize goes to Dr. Minakshi Malhotra from BJMC Pune, a cash of rupees 2,000. Next. Next. Oral presentation for the faculty. Second prize going to Dr. Atul Keche of AIMS Bhopal, a cash of rupees 1,000. Congratulations. And the first prize goes to Sara Hinavi from HBTMC Mumbai. Heartiest congratulations. Cash prize of rupees 2,000. Thank you very much. As we come to the end, my last duty would be give the vote of thanks. As all good things come to an end, so also this first virtual conference of MLM, that is ForensicCon 2020, comes to an end. I would like to thank Honorable Municipal Commissioner, Mr. Ayush Chahal, our Additional Municipal Commissioner, Suresh Kakani sir, Director and Dean of our institute, Dr. Ramesh Bharmal sir, for being the patron and the organizing chairman. I thank our Honorable CM sir, Deputy CM sir, Home Minister, Health Minister, Minister of Medical Education and Guardian Minister sir, for giving messages for our souvenir and their blessings. I thank all the organizers, moderators and chairpersons who took out time and actively participated in this. I thank the President of MMC, Dr. Utture sir, Sanjay Deshmukh sir, Registrar of MMC, for their immense support for conducting this conference. I also thank the EC of MLM for giving us an opportunity to host this conference. I thank Dr. S.M. Patil sir for personally taking time out, coming with me to get messages from all the honorable ministers. I thank Dr. Sukhdeve, Dr. Kolle, Dr. Sara, Dr. Abhijit Osmani. All of them have been great help. All the heads of department in the state and outside who have been very supportive to us. My special thanks to two people. One is Dr. Manoj Gupta, who generously donated cash prizes for all the prize winners, and Dr. Ajay Taure, without any hesitation, helped us a lot during this conference. I also thank those who have given advertisements for our souvenirs. I thank all the participants and students who participated in this. Dr. Pawan Sabre, the man behind this conference, I could not give time, but he was the one who coordinated the whole efforts. My office staff, all my associate professors, all my lecturers, my residents, they have put in lots of efforts since last 10 days. They used to be here till 10:30 in the night and come back at 8 o'clock over here. All those who directly or indirectly supported us in smooth conduction of Forensic Medicon 2020. If I fail to thank anyone, it is inadvertently and without any malice. If there were any shortcomings during this conference, I bear the responsibility for us. I request all of you to kindly inform us what were the shortcomings so that we can improve in future. One last announcement. Those who have paid excess money will be refunded the money after audit, latest in a month's time. Thank you very much. Jai Hind.